Welcome, Ed, and thanks for your time.
So it's a tremendous pleasure to be here at this amazing show, of all these companies here in India and from around the world. It's really a truly Mobile World Congress India.
Qualcomm has been a key player in wireless technologies, be it your Snapdragon chips, your wireless modems, or the wireless technology itself. So, how do you envision the future of wireless technologies evolving over the next 5 to 10 years, Ed?
I see the future very, very rich for wireless technologies. We're going through an era of change, and this is an era of change in many different dimensions. We're seeing the continual evolution and enhancement of cellular operators networks. We're going up in data rates and capabilities of these networks so that we're able to provide video services ubiquitously. We're looking at doing things like XR services in the future and such. Cellular operators networks are now being looked at for deployment in private type networks. So there's a rich area for not only the technology, but for the networks and the mobile systems out there.
Generative AI is becoming very prominent across industries. Is it the right time for operator to kind of ride on this generative AI technology, or is it like you have to wait for the standards to come in? Because you're talking about an enterprise customer where even 1% error is a challenge, right?
I have the view that operators need to jump into these new technologies and upfront jump into them and get them. Yes, there'll be mistakes made. That's part of the learning process. But I've seen over my career, too often operators are a little reluctant to move into the new technologies. And therefore, they no longer have the ability to monetize many of the services that are running over their networks. We go back 20 years ago and ringtones were there, okay, and they could monetize that, but that was very simple. But they never quite moved from that very simple model of I can buy a ringtone to the App Store, and therefore, you have Apple and Google's a Play Store sort of running that part of the business, and the operators aren't there, so they have to get in and do it and get there early, because if not, those other players will go over we'll just make it happen.
Wonderful. That's really an interesting answer, Ed. But let me address the elephant in the room now, Ed. It's been 5 years since 5G came to life. 5G is still has not come to the full potential as such as a technology. So in release 18, you have 5G Advanced. Do you think what 5G has missed, can 5G Advanced or 6G can address that in terms of capabilities, what 5G did not?
So let me just say that it sometimes often is that we tend to lag in our deployments in this industry, sometimes even a G behind. But I just want to bring up more the point that we add in 5G such a rich set of capabilities and all that go beyond what was the enhanced mobile broadband or the mobile broadband capability. Mobile broadband is basically internet service to your phone, okay? But the point is that go beyond that. Those have had limited deployment in some ways, but I think we better look at markets. And we've seen generally that the IoT markets have been increasing, for example, and that you're starting to see that. But you also have to remember that many of these markets work very differently than the traditional cellular consumer cell phone market. Many of these people are deploying it in industrial situations or IoT situations. They want to prove the technology before they go out and do it. So they want to be able to, as we used to say, kick the tires. By the way, I'm seeing a lot of startup companies here in India really trying to play with many of these applications and all. And I think that's really wonderful, okay, because these things can really provide value, whether it's from meter reading, which is one that's been quite successful around the world, whether it's through a short range type of communications or putting an NB-IoT modem in the meter or a regular cellular modem in the meter, that works.
Very interesting. What do you think 6G actually is bringing to the table, what 5G has not?
Well, there are several things that are really going to be going on with 6G. First, every G gives us first, the ability to potentially enhance the air interface, enhance the network, okay? And bring in the technology changes and innovations that have occurred over the previous, say, 10 years or so, which is roughly the time between, generations of these. But the other thing that it does is it allows us to bring newer technologies overall in. And newer technologies are coming often from semiconductor technologies, which have enhanced. And it gives the opportunity to get to a better base of those technologies. Certainly, we're seeing from 6G really a couple big areas of emphasis from the operators. One area of emphasis is what's often called sustainability, which is really how to reduce the power consumption of our networks. Right now, many networks, a third of the operator's cost is electricity. Okay, how do we get that power consumption down? That's one big area. And the second big area that I see changing, there's a lot of focus on, is really about security. And security is a lot about implementation and security, i.e., hey, do you make it so there's no trapdoors, the code is good and free of little faults and things like that. And good vendors spend a lot of time on it. But we're also now at the time where quantum computing may come out. Some of the classic things, particularly with public key cryptography, are going to be much easier to break. So we're having to go with a next generation of cryptography for some aspects of it, lengthen our keys in other areas and things. Some of this may come in as part of the future generations of 5G, but certainly I think for the get-go of 6G, we'll be focusing on that.
The last question of this fireside chat I want to ask you is, how do you think India is doing with likes of Bharat Alliance? How do you think India is kind of helping in standardization around 6G, 5G, and on the global stage? What do you see India can do more?
Well, I think a couple things are happening. First, this is the first G where I think India has gotten sort of organized up front. It's created the Bharat 6G Alliance. That's somewhat similar to what a number of other countries have done around the world. And that puts, to some extent, puts the India flag up there that we're interested in. But, when you go into the 3GPP, then, there'll be perhaps some companies, some universities will put together proposals or something like that and go into 3GPP. But 3GPP is going to look at the merits of the technology as it relates to the entire system that 3GPP is putting together. It's going to look at the performance, the complexity, potentially some power consumption issues, all of these which will be factored into decisions about whether to include technology. In it. By the way, I also should have mentioned just, hey, how compatible is it with the previous generations of technology? For example, to give a Qualcomm perspective, we build chips. Our chips today support 2G, 3G, 4G, and 5G, and maybe we got to add to 6G at some point. But the point is, you don't want to charge another 50% for a chip. So you need to understand, how does that design for 6G fit into the chip so that, hey, the cost of 6G is very minimal when we add it to the phone. So these are all the types of questions that happen. And so I think it's going to be, India, as I said, is on the map. I mean, by the way, this event, as I started off saying, is just a tremendous testament to that. And I think just rolling up, as we say, rolling up the sleeves, doing the technology work, okay, and being part of the process in the system will end up leading to a lot of knowledge being gained by Indian companies as well as the country as a whole on how to participate and do standardization.
Wonderful. Thanks for sharing your wisdom. Thanks for your time again. Thank you so much.
Thank
That
you
was
very much.
the fireside chat with Ed.